technological skills. Are y'all able to see it?
Yes.
Excellent. So does it have a little, okay, so evaluating bilinguals, even when you're not bilingual. Here we go, guys. Oh God, how do I go to the next slide? Oh God. Okay. So first, just a few facts about bilingualism. Bilingualism is actually the norm. Only here in the United States is it really the exception. Half to a third of the world are actually bilinguals. Then this, according to the census in 2021, 21% of school-age children speak a language other than English in the home. So if you're in the schools or you're working with kids, you're likely to get someone who speaks a language other than English. And research has found a lot of benefits about for bilingualism, especially for like thinking, preventing dementia, better pathways for vocabulary. So there are a lot of benefits to bilingualism. There's two types of bilinguals. Sometimes people think there's only one way to become bilingual, and that's the one here in the pink on the left, sequential. That's when you learn one language and then you learn a second language. This is how I became bilingual. I'm originally from Mexico City. I moved to the States when I was 9. So Spanish was my first language, and then I learned English when I was 9. Typically, the line that is drawn in the sand by the researchers is age 3. So if they were introduced to one language before age 3 and then the second one was added, then they're considered sequential. What we really have a lot of right now in the United States is simultaneous, where you're learning both languages at the same time since before the age of 3. There's been a lot of research in terms of, is one better than the other? And really, there isn't one better way to become bilingual. They're both effective. They have their benefits and their drawbacks. Sequential bilinguals typically have an accent in their second language, depending on when they started. Simultaneous bilinguals, you know, learn both languages, but by learning two systems at the exact same time can have a lot of common errors, like, they know the word in one language but not the other, or they take the word order of one language and apply it to the other. So it takes just a little bit longer for us to truly see their entire picture. So there are 5 great ways to raise a bilingual child. Sometimes people think there's only one way, or that there's like a better way. And there isn't. There's no right or wrong way to raise a bilingual. But these are the 5 most common ways that parents raise bilingual children. So one parent, one language. So say one parent speaks French, the other one speaks English, and the child will learn, oh, with this parent, I speak in French. With this parent, I speak in English. It's a very successful way to raise a bilingual child. It can be tricky when the parents want to speak to each other if they both don't know the languages. Minority language at home. Some families, because the community in the United States, a lot of things are in English. So when they're out and about, they're at the playground, they will, when they're at school, they speak English. And then when they're in the home, they use the minority language in the home. Time and place is when that certain time or place is designated. So I used to implement time and place with my younger sisters. And when we were going out somewhere, we could speak in English in the car, but when we were coming home in the car, we had to speak in Spanish. And so some families, choose like school versus home versus church. Some families choose to go to church in their language. There's also mixed language families where, all family members speak multiple languages to the child. And outside resource families. Those are the families that they don't speak another language, but hey, they want a bilingual child. So they will put their child in a bilingual program, or they will hire a nanny. These are all effective ways to raise a bilingual child. So if anyone ever asks, what's the best way to raise a bilingual child? The answer is whatever works best for the family. All right. So what, Michelle? So what? Well, there are a lot more students who need our help than there are bilingual service providers in ASHA. If we look like at numbers, the green here is how many English language learning students there are in the United States. And then if we look at the like greenish teal, that's how many bilingual SLP providers reported by ASHA. So, you know, I graduated, man, 2006, I think. I got my master's. And then we were talking about how like we just have to get more bilinguals in the field. But like here we are in 2024, and still the amount of bilingual providers to the children, it's a huge discrepancy. And we all know ASHA is a very white field, and minorities, get a lot of barriers put in their way to go through grad programs. I mean, I'm sure everyone has stories. I have my own, and I, have my white presentation privilege. But there's a lot of barriers we're not getting the bilingual SLPs out there. And the other thing to note is like, this is just like how many people speak a language other than English and can provide services, but that doesn't mean it's the same language. So yeah, I speak Spanish, but I don't speak Amharic. I don't speak French. So the way I see it is we got to become a little bit more creative. And what I hope my passion project is to help other SLPs be more comfortable with working with bilinguals, even if you don't speak that other language. So assessments are like, they're my jam. They're like what I do. So really the focus of today a lot is going to be on, okay, how am I going to test a kid who comes to me who speaks another language in the home? So the important things to do whenever you get a child on your caseload that it has some exposure to another language is to research the native language. I'm going to show all of you. I put on here in pink Difference and Disorder by Bilinguistics. This book is like my Bible. Oh, you guys can't see because I'm presenting. There is a great book by Bilinguistics, and it has Hebrew, Korean, Vietnamese, German, Japanese, Farsi, Czech, Mandarin, French, Russian, Spanish, Arabic, and African American English. That's what they call it here, guys. It's got everything that you want to know: how many people speak it, dialectical variations, age of acquisition for sounds, suppression of phonological processes, what sounds exist in one language and not in the other. This is my Bible. For whenever they speak a language that isn't here, then I go to the ASHA website, and they will usually have information. You want to look into the language before the evaluation even comes. One of the biggest things that I look at for our TIC is what are the sounds that exist in both languages, because that's what we're going to expect the child to do. We're not ESL teachers. We're here to say, is there a speech disorder? So if they need to have a problem with it in both language systems, and if they speak another language, maybe they're substituting because that sound just doesn't exist in their language. Well, that's just a difference. It's not a disorder. So find what we have in common, and those are the sounds we're going to test for. What sounds are there in English and in Farsi? And those are the sounds I'm going to test for to see, hey, does this child presenting with this speech delay or not? And look for the syntactic features of the language. Sometimes we think that like, okay, I got it. I'm gonna get myself an interpreter. I'm gonna be just fine. But sometimes the word order matters, or male and female means Spanish is everything is male and female. And so there are a lot of things that beyond the sound systems that we should look into. These are all things you want to know before you go in. So here's an example of what I mean of like finding those sounds that we have in common, right? So this is Spanish and English. On the green side are the sounds that occur in Spanish and not English. So it's the ñ, like a niño, and uña. The simple R, actually it's funny because both R's in Spanish don't exist in English. So Spanish has the trill R and the ere. And then the X represents a ch. It's like a glottal sound, like an ajo. Then we've got in English, we've got the th, the j, the sh, the z, the v, all of these sounds that don't occur in Spanish. And then in the middle, these are the sounds we're going to be looking for. I know some of you out there are going to be like, I've seen words in Spanish with a V. V is actually an allophonic variation. It's not a true phoneme in Spanish because if you say vaso or vaso, it will not change the meaning of the word. So some people will use it interchangeably. Same with like SH and CH. That's why a lot of people will say chicken for chicken because in Latin American countries, you can use one or the other and it doesn't change the meaning of the word. So they're not considered true phonemes. And then also, these are what you want to target in speech therapy, right? We're not ESL teachers. We're not going to work on the j if they just don't have it because they don't know English. We're going to work on the sound systems that are present in both. Here are some like things that people think they're confused. I'm gonna start with kids don't get confused. Bilinguals don't get confused. There's a lot of myths out there, and we're gonna just squash them. Kids don't get confused, but when becoming a bilingual, there are some common traits that we see. So the first one is transfer, and that's when the influence of one language goes into the other. So for example, the word order. So in Spanish, you would say, esta casa es más grande. And if I were to translate that word for word to English, this house is more bigger. In Spanish, it's correct, but in English, it's not, right? This is very typical in language acquisition. This is not something we should be targeting in speech therapy. Code switching, there's a difference between code switching and Spanglish. Code switching is changing the languages over a phrase or a sentence. So, mi casa es su casa, come on over. This is a sign of mastery in both, not a delay. We're going to do a little stop. What is Spanglish? Spanglish is when you have the whole sentence and then you throw in words from the other language. Ve tráeme tus shoes. Oh, go bring me your zapatos, right? That's Spanglish, where within this sentence, you're throwing in words from both languages. It's frowned upon to do Spanglish. A lot of adults who speak both languages do the Spanglish. But when we're raising little ones and this is their language model, we don't teach them word order in either language. And so I always say, don't do Spanglish. But code switching, like the child does it to you, it's total, we accept it. We're not going to say, oh, they're confused because one sentence is in one language and one is in the other. Oh, look, I did have Spanglish on the side. Just don't do it, guys. Interpreters. Working with interpreters can be great, but it can also be very tricky because it requires a lot more work than we think. Don't ever get an interpreter and then just walk into your evaluation with the interpreter without training them first. So it's always best if you can get them in person. Some companies, like they will do it over Zoom. Sometimes they'll just give you like the phone language line. That's like the worst when they're on the phone. But if you can get them in person for at least the assessment, you'll do a much better job at assessing. The phone interpretation is really much better for like if you're just scheduling with the parent or asking them questions. It's not really going to help you on evaluation day. You got to train them before they come in that you have to say, okay, I am here looking for a delay. So if they say things, you need to tell me exactly how they say it. Don't fill in words. Don't move the words around in order. You need to tell me how they say it. Or, if there's something culturally inappropriate, like of this culture that I don't know, I need you to tell me because I need to pick up on these things. I also always give a protocol to the interpreter. So I always like go through, explain, okay, here I'm going to be bossing you around. I'm going to say number 2, and then you're going to say the word in Spanish. So it's always good to give them a set of protocols. You have your set of protocols. They won't be writing on theirs, and then you just put it back on your shelf. And if it's a language that you're not familiar with, or you couldn't get information when researching, get some of that cultural information from your interpreter. Here's a fun thing that I learned. I didn't know, for example, we have a lot of families from Ethiopia where I work. And so, they speak Amharic, and I'm like, oh, I know all of my things. I always asked them about feeding and can they feed themselves with a fork and a spoon? Can they drink from an open cup? And thanks to my interpreter, I learned that in Ethiopian homes, there aren't forks and spoons at most meals because they have like a spongy bread that they twist with their hands and eat, and it's culturally appropriate. So I have been ducking kids for like not eating with a spoon when it wasn't even like in their culture to do that. So it's always good to check with them all of this before the parent comes in. Now, let's talk about specific tests. Okay, I will disclaimer, the PLS is one of my least favorite assessments because I feel like it inflates the scores. Like kids who I want to qualify don't qualify. But it's the best for using when you have an interpreter. Y'all can't see my face, can you? Hold on, let me see. I feel like I'm going to stop the share. Hold on.
We can see you.
You can? Okay.
Yes.
If you can see on the protocol, it's got every single page. It's the English side and the Spanish side. And it was made to be administered bilingually. So let's find one that, for example, colors. Here's colors at the top, right? So on one side, you'll have all the colors. Is it Spanish? Yeah, in Spanish. And here they all are in English. And you have a spot to mark in either. So then if they identified it in either language, you get to mark it here, and then you can give them the right or wrong score. Why is this great? Because then you can know what they're supposed to be saying, and you can tell them, give this item number. And okay, I got to go back for basil. And you just boss them around to go forward or backward. And what I would do is have the interpreter, depending on the kid. Let's say the kid speaks a lot of English, administer the bilingual Spanish completely in English till you get a ceiling, and then go back and only re-administer missed items in Spanish by using the interpreter. So you flip back and say, okay, now I want you to say this. Now I want you to say this. So that is one way to do it. Or you can have the interpreter do it in Spanish, and then you can go back and re-administer missed items in English. You always want to give the child a chance to show you that skill in both languages. And on the expressive part, it's sometimes easier because you'll just hear them say the words and you can mark which one it was. So the PLS is very, very friendly to use with an interpreter, and you can feel a little more confident about reporting standard scores because it's normed on monolingual Spanish speakers and bilingual Spanish English speakers. And it's intended to be administered in one or in both languages. So this is the best tool I can give you for assessment of language. Then when it comes to vocabulary, the RO and the EO are kind of the same way. Actually, when I assess, I start with the EO, like the expressive one-word picture vocabulary test, because I kind of get a sense of like, what's the child going to label in, right? And then I can mark it. So this one also, oh God, I don't know how clear it is. Can you see it's got the word in both languages for every single item? And it even has, like, let's find one. Like item 30, it has the different dialectical ways to say purse. So this is another great tool. How I administer this is I would keep one. You give the interpreter one. This one I administer bilingually. That's a Michelle thing. I don't think that's how the manual says to do it, but you have 4 trial items. And so I tell the child, we're going to say the same word and you have to point to one picture, right? And so then you tell the interpreter, I say it in English, you say it in Spanish, and then the child gets to point. And most of the time that saves me time. And then the child got to hear the word in both languages and demonstrate whether or not they knew it in either one. So the Spanish bilingual receptive one-word picture vocabulary test, great tool. And the same for the expressive one word. I'll show you. The expressive one word also has in both languages, right? So you will know whether or not they kind of said something near it or not. And on this one, it has like S's and E's for Spanish and English. So you can actually even get a percentage of like how many words did they label appropriately in Spanish versus English. So this one I would just flip the page, hear what the kid says, and go. And maybe you could just have a signal with the interpreter for them to tell you whether it's right or wrong, so you know like to go forward or backward. But these are my go-to assessments that I think you could do with an interpreter.
So with the PLS 5, do you normally do that one in Spanish first, or you were given the example of when you did it in English, and then if they've missed something in English, you'd go back in Spanish, but you don't start in Spanish with the PLS 5 one?
That is a good question. It depends on like the child, right? Sometimes like bilinguals are not truly balanced. There's usually one that they're using the most of. And so I kind of ask like, how are they exposed to Spanish? Is it like just the grandma that they see, over the summer? Is it a Spanish immersion program? Is it one parent, one language? And I typically start with the EO and see what they label in the most, because I'm just showing you a picture and listening to you. And whatever you labeled the most to pictures, that's the language I choose to start my PLS with, and then re-administer missed items in the other one. The PLS is just so long that if you like, and it's cumbersome to do simultaneous administration of every single one. So I would just feel out the kid, especially like if they're a school age kid, they've been in, once they get to school, they start learning English. So say they've been there for 2 years, start in English, have the interpreter only do missed items in Spanish, because they're gonna have a lot of this vocabulary in Spanish. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Should I take this off so I can go? I'll stop sharing so I can have my full face. Okay, did I talk too fast? Come on, guys. Bring out the questions. Radia, I see you in here. I'm expecting a question from you. See, no questions beyond Daria.
I
Or
didn't
anything
think
else you want to know? Oh,
My name is Shanice. I didn't think you spoke too fast. I thought it was pretty clear, pretty straight to the point. Yeah. I'm just here for just to hear, different types of information. I'm very big on funny enough, I was invited to a PPT today, and there was a communication concern, and instantly I said, oh well, he needs to be tested bilingually, because if he's only speaking Spanish, his parents only speak Spanish. They claim that he was tested out of like, I guess, an MLL program, but I don't know to what extent, how extensive that language was in that program. We're at the
mhm.
high school level at this point. Language is getting a lot more complex, and he's even saying that he's nervous with talking to, because he transferred to the school, nervous with talking to his peers because he can't always express how he feels in English. So I just, I was really confused as to why I was there. But my thoughts are that, because I thought it was pretty clear, my thoughts are just that I'm going to test him bilingually. And funny enough, I thought that the entire team would test bilingually, but you know, I can't control what other people do, but what I can do is make sure that my area is on point. So I was just, there's always a bilingual assessment being brought up, or the need for it is pretty frequent, at least throughout, or has been throughout my career. I just don't think enough people consider testing bilingually, unfortunately.
And I'm glad that you already came into it knowing, because yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, we don't want to put a kid in special ed who's just learning English as a second language. But
Yeah.
also, we don't want to
Right.
be like, oh, he's not doing it because he speaks Spanish at home. And then we delay services just because we didn't test him both. So,
Yeah.
God, but you got high schooler. Have you thought
Yeah.
about what test you're going to give? Or are you going to, or
I
do you have a bilingual assessor who could do it?
So there was an individual who
Shh.
tested bilingually, because the day was so hectic, and this happened towards the ending of the day. my plan, I have not thought about the plan as of yet, other than just reaching out to the director and seeing who may have taken over that position, and then meeting with them and speaking with them and seeing, what their thoughts are. I know that he understands English. He's a pretty bright young man, but I just feel as though I feel more comfortable testing him in Spanish as well. Just as you mentioned, just to see if it is just a weakness in English rather than him just not understanding certain concepts. I just,
Yeah, and
yeah.
Shanice, you can write down my contact info, and if I can be any support to you, like as this progresses, don't hesitate to reach out.
No, well, thank you.
Of course, you have to help each other out.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any informal assessments for children 0 to 7 years old besides the standard?
Um, well, like that's already been like put together and to use. Um, I mean, I feel like then you can use any informal or like criterion reference assessment that's out there and
Hmm.
just look at both languages, like the functional communication profile, for example, like doesn't give you standard scores, or I mean, you could technically no, because the Rossetti's going to put you is not criterion, it's going to give you
Hmm.
some form of age range. Um, there is another one. So there's a great assessment, it's called the BESA, but that one's going to give standard scores. So
Oh,
you don't want to do that one. I would say anything that you would do criterion reference for an English speaking child, you could do for a bilingual, but really research the language because it
okay.
could be that, for example, like possessives are acquired at a younger or later age than in
Yes.
English. Or you want to just make sure that you're not discounting for like, for example, MLU, right? For English speakers, we use MLU, how many words they can put together, as an indicator of where they are in their language.
Yes.
But in Spanish, you can put a lot of things into one word. So it's more about like how complex the words are. So in English, I could say like um, big female frog. I
Mhm.
can't put you in one word, but I can
Yes.
say ranota, and that means big female frog. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yes.
it's so then, it's the same as did they say frog or did they say, you know, big green frog? You can't tell the difference because it's just in one word. So you just want to, if you're doing qualitative, make sure you're looking at that language and what are the skills that they need at that language. Don't just apply English norms into Spanish because the skills come in at a different age.
Okay. Thank you.
No, you're welcome.
Hi, Michelle. This is Radia. You caught me.
Yes.
Quick question. I know kind of the conversation you're talking about now, in reference to the something non-standardized. What are your thoughts on maybe like a language sample for some of these lovelies? With that kind of, especially, I know obviously you might have the Spanish piece, but even in other languages, and how do you kind of capture that? And do you use the interpreter to break it down later, or like what are like that process?
Yeah, I think that a language sample is a great idea. Definitely I would record it. That can also help you like say for our tick, right? I wouldn't ask any of you to try to determine like to give a Spanish articulation test. But if you did have that language sample, you could always review it later with another bilingual provider who can help you through it, or, depends on how much time an interpreter is willing to give you. But yeah, a language sample is a great idea because you can catch on to so many things, artic, fluency, and just like word structure. And that's something you could like maybe just record them like looking at books or playing with the mom, talking about their favorite movie. Radia, that's a great idea.
Since you spoke about fluency, like if you come in with a stutterer, what are we actually looking for if that child's bilingual?
Same things that you look for in English, is it prolongations? Is it part word, whole word? How I would approach it the same. There is like some research to indicate that some children who are bilingual might experience more disfluencies than monolinguals. But you're basically looking for the same things like blocks, how long is it lasting? And, I'd have to look at the manual, but I actually use the SSI on Spanish speakers and have reported standard scores because I'm looking at like, I have a language sample, I'm counting syllables. Is it a prolongation? Like, how long did it last? I always record the language sample and use the SSI. But look at the manual before you get in trouble for reporting standard scores because I told you you could. But I do. I do it all the time.
Okay.
I have a comment. Someone, I think I missed who was speaking, but they asked about language samples or mentioned something about collecting language samples. I know that SLAM cards, they do come bilingually as well. Are you guys familiar
Tell
with
me about the
SLAM?
SLAM cards.
Oh, I love
Are we
SLAM cards.
familiar? And you can sequence them.
Writing
So
this down.
it's usually different sets. So oh gosh. And they also have them, the editions of them on boom cards.
Okay.
But pretty much it's and it comes in elementary and I think like middle school and then high school, and it's different scenarios, and it's a great way to get a language sample for the younger children. There's pictures and there's prompts to kind of get them to talk about what they see, and you can kind of hear what kind of language they have. And then there's also like questions about what they think happened in the picture, or tell me a story. It's just like, a nice little guide, and there's a little rubric to it as well.
Kate Crowley. Kate
Yes.
Crowley from Teachers College developed the SLAM cards.
Ooh, I mean, that's it. That's all you had to say. It's perfect. Use it. Anything from her. She's
Yeah.
like the mecca of I if it didn't cost so much money, I would want to go to teachers college to get my bilingual extension just because of the knowledge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Ooh,
I thought about Teachers
SLAM
College.
cards. Thank you. You taught me
Yes,
something.
it's very it's usually what I use if I don't know what, like if I don't know what it is that I'm stepping into, and I just kind of want to see how they inference, because I'm in high school and even when I was in middle school, just to kind of get them talking. But the younger ones, there's a one with crayons. The stories that I got, it's just interesting to hear how the children think and the kind of language that they have. So, and it's a nice little guide, and it's structured, and it makes things a little easier. You can print them out, you can laminate. If you have an iPad and they're tech savvy, you can have them like rearrange the pictures in order and then have them tell you the story, and then ask them questions about why they thought that happened, how it, just to kind of get some like language. This is more so for language.
No, I love
So
it.
then it's good.
Okay. Shanice, I
Okay.
have to ask. I see a Howard hoodie.
Yeah.
Are you
So
in
I
the DMV
graduated.
area?
So I'm in Connecticut
No.
now. I know.
Well,
It
I was
is
gonna
out.
say, girl, I'm in Arlington. Like, whatever
Yeah.
your high schooler is, I got you. But no, you're Connecticut. I can't.
I'm
No.
in Connecticut, yes. But I did graduate from Howard and I was in the DMV
Great
area.
university.
Yeah, but I started my career in New York because I felt like I'm from New York, and I felt like, New York is it's fast, it will get me the experience that I needed, but then the pandemic hit and I came to Connecticut, and it's like but Connecticut is okay, it's cool. Yeah. Someone said Connecticut in the chat. What part of Connecticut? Did I miss that? Where did I see?
I saw it. Somebody shouted out Connecticut.
Hi, it's Rudy again. I'm sorry. I grew up in Connecticut, outside of Hartford.
Okay, so further up. So I work in Norwalk, which is closer to Stamford.
Yes.
Yes.
So
Mhm.
it's a pretty
Yeah.
area.
Yeah, I've
Sure.
never been to Connecticut.
Sure.
I've made it to New York, guys, and I made it to Boston. Basically anywhere the ASHA convention goes, but
Yeah. You've drove through Connecticut or maybe flew through. Or
I
flew past.
probably flew through. Yes,
Yeah,
that
flew past.
is facts. But if you give me a vacation, I'm going to Florida. Okay, Daria, where are you from? You've been giving me 2 great shout outs to my Florida comments.
I'm originally from the Bronx. I'm still here in the Bronx, but I did go to USF, and I'm the class of 92 and 94. I did my undergrad in 92 and I got my grad in 94. So I'm an old head just listening, but go Bulls.
Go Bulls. I love it. I love it.
I'm from the Bronx. We never get much love, especially in this new generation. They always have something to say about the Bronx, but it's okay.
Well, right now we don't even know what computers are.
Loretta's giving a shout out to the Bronx. Bronx all day. Terry, you gonna ask me a question? You haven't asked me anything yet.
Oh, I asked a few questions, but I ran out. But I'm also from the Bronx as well.
All these Northerners. Love it. I love it. Does anybody have other bilingual questions that don't have to do with assessment or nothing?
Well, I currently supervise monolingual and bilingual providers in my district in New York City. And I'm just wondering, are there any bilingual books that you really like or subscribe to that you would use as sometimes that quick assessment, not say like a PLS, but new student on your caseload and you just want to know next steps, is he near his goals or whatever, and you want to use like a storybook. Are there any books that you like or use that are, I guess, bilingual, kind of monolingual friendly? I'd
That's a
love
very
to.
good question. Like what age? What age are we thinking here?
I'm thinking my pre-K through first.
Yeah, I would definitely do I would do like one of those like repetitive books or book with no words, or I would like cover up the words.
Uh-huh.
That way you can make it as quick or as long. Sometimes like finding good Spanish books is tricky, right?
Yeah,
And so
it
I'd
is.
rather there were times where I used to like tape over the words and write my own in Spanish for the parent. Like even Brown Bear, I hate how they translated Brown Bear into Spanish. Um, I'm stumped. I'm trying to think of all the classics of books. I'll tell you this, don't do
Very
the
Hungry
Cat in the Hat.
Caterpillar, I think I've seen like on Lunes, on Martes, he ate this, or like labeling like that, I'm thinking.
And it's got a lot of fruits. Hungry Caterpillar.
Yeah.
All I would say is you got to check the dialect of the family before you read that book. Because sometimes, especially with food, the problem with the translation is like 29 countries speak Spanish. So if you get a family who calls it something different, then you might be like saying the wrong word, or they might not
Like
call it that, or
butterfly
they
might
might
be
not be used
different
to
in
that.
different languages. Like even turning into a butterfly. It could be mariposa and it could be something else. Butterfly could
Yeah.
mean
Ooh.
something
Yeah. And like
else.
ladybug can be
Yeah.
Catarina or it can be Mariquita. And like, I always want to check. Do y'all want to hear another fun Michelle story, guys?
Yeah.
I'm gonna tell you another fun Michelle story. Listen, foods and bugs are the easiest way to get yourself in trouble with a bilingual. So when I gave therapy in Florida, I used to have units, and that way I would like keep my stuff together. Every month was a unit, and so I had my bug unit, and I would bring my client back to give therapy, and then I'd bring him back to the waiting room, and then I would talk about what we did in session with mom. And so I started the theme of bugs. I come back out and I tell the mom, we've started the new unit and it's on bugs. But in Mexico, we call it bichos. Is the bichos. And like she like goes pale. My entire front office staff is laughing. Turns out that my word for bugs is her word for the male private part. And I said
Okay.
it like out loud in the waiting room. So you just like you never know. Like to me, a word for seashell to an Argentinian is a woman's private part. Like you can just really easily
Yeah.
go down a wrong path. So always check what country they're from to have the right word, and like don't be afraid to like tape over and write it. books is I'm gonna have to think of more. I do like the Hungry Caterpillar. I mean, I
Yeah,
like Eric Carle books. I kind
yeah.
of want to say Chicka Chicka Boom Boom, but like, do we want to focus on letters? No. Those like really repetitive ones. I don't like the Dr. Seuss books for bilinguals because they don't translate well with all the like the rhymings and stuff, and they don't do well. If I think of more, Daria, I'll follow up with Terry to get that info to you.
Great.
Okay.
Thanks.
I'm thinking about like what type of screen is it we just wanted to screen bilingual children? What kind of test can we use?
So definitely the PLS does have a screener, a Spanish screener that you can use, and it goes till 6 or 7. Not to be plugging my own, it is not standardized, but in my side hustle, I did develop a Spanish articulation screener. I probably have it laying around here. Do I? Ah, of course I'm failing at finding it. So, I came up with one. I sell it on Teachers Pay Teachers. I don't know, it's like $5, but there are a lot of people on Teachers Pay Teachers that have put stuff. What I like, obviously, about what I made, my articulation screener has cognates. So, whether they say the word in English or in Spanish, you can check for the sound in both. So it's like coffee and café, right? So then you're looking for k in the initial and in the middle, and it kind of has little boxes for all of them. Why didn't I have that for my show and tell? Anyway, so I obviously recommend my screener because I came up with it and I like it. There's no standardization, but I do put on there like the norms, English norms and Spanish norms of when the sounds come in. I think both English and Spanish PLSs have a screener all the way up to 6 or 7. I'm not sure. And definitely check out Teachers Pay Teachers. There's a lot of like really great bilinguals out there. Let's see, like Habla Cadabra. She does like apraxia stuff in Spanish. Bilingual Speechy, like she's who I want to be when I grow up. She has a lot of cognates for like articulation cards. She has a lot of like great handouts for parents on bilingualism, Bilingual Speechy. Huge shout out to her.
Mm.
I would go more the route of those. We all love Super Duper. Super Duper Spanish products are not great.
Okay.
So I would not, they're great, but not always the Spanish ones. Yeah, that's all.
Okay. For your articulation test, what is the age range?
So it's got all the sounds.
Okay.
Now I feel like looking for it, but then all of you are gonna know that my room is a real big mess. Maybe I can project it on the screen. I can probably find it. So it's it has every sound. Let me find it, and then I'll project it on the screen. But it has every sound that you would that is shared between English and Spanish. So it can go up to any age. But again, it's not gonna, like if you work for a school system and you're needing to have like a standardized assessment for determining eligibility, I don't want to lie and say that, you're going to have you won't be able to give like, you have to qualitatively because it's not normed. Am I making sense? I feel like I'm not making sense. Okay. I'm going to find it to show it to you guys. Why am I failing? And I am not the only one who did this. There are other people who have come up with great screeners, but here we go. All right. Make this big. Okay, I feel like I'm failing, but I will get it together. Here we go. Okay, so it has all the shared, I mean, of course, the pictures that you'll determine how late you could go, but you see they're all cognates. So doctor, diamond, diamante, and then you have the little box where you can put if it was right or wrong. So this one you can have them say it in English and Spanish or in both. And these are all the shared sounds, and then I have the norms by age. So then you could know, oh, okay, they're missing this sound in English, but is it appropriate or is it not appropriate? So
How
that's
much?
my
What's the
TPT.
price?
I want to say it's $5. Now it's either 3 or 5,
Okay.
something like that.
All right.
Um,
Thank you.
no, you're welcome. I do put a lot of like resources. It's mostly archaic stuff. I am on Boom Learning too, but again, I like to empower monolinguals working with bilinguals. So a lot of the stuff I frame thinking like, okay, I'm going to make this resource in both. So then you could give therapy with initial K, and all your pictures will be initial K in English. And then you'll have the Spanish one you can print and say, Mom, you work on all these at home. And
Mhm.
like the design looks the same, but suddenly all the words have initial K and they're Spanish words. Or sometimes I have just like a cognate list. Do you want to come up with your own thing that you want to do? Well, here's some words that you can do for this sound and initial, medial, final position of words. Because you don't need to speak Spanish. You can give the therapy in English and then give the parent a good resource to work on at home.
That's a good idea. I like that.
Oh, yeah. Bilingual
Mm.
SLP LLC.
Mhm.
That is my
Mhm.
handle. It's got a little heart like that. And I'm also on Instagram. I respond. So if y'all want to follow me, I put a lot of like tips for working with bilinguals or like some of my resources I put on there. But you can also just email me if you ever, I can have a lot of great opinions about good products out there. I'll tell you the stuff even if it's like not me that made it. Because sometimes people make it better than me, and I accept that.
I think Loretta Lewis has some questions. She's like, what are those names again? I guess for the assessments. She has a question like bilingual speechy, and she's
Oh, yeah. Okay. So these are just creators who make really good quality research based stuff. So Bilingual Speechy, she has a website and she is on TPT. Like whenever she puts out a resource, she'll tell you like the research behind it. So it's not like, so she's just legit. And there's another one called Habla Cadabra. Let me put it in the chat. Why am I trying to drive you crazy? Here we go. They do apraxia cards in Spanish.
Wow.
And um and I'll think of some more. Oh, Panda Speech makes some good stuff. Again, these are like people that didn't do the research, right? So it's going to be like criterion reference kind of stuff. But like they just have a good idea. Oh God, did I send it to just you, Loretta? Or did I send it to everyone?
Everyone has it.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Panda Speech, she creates a lot of great stuff. I don't know. Here's what I notice a lot in bilingual assessment and bilingual resources is sometimes companies or people just like take a dictionary and then they just like, pick all the words out of a dictionary and then they don't take like dialect into consideration or that like it might be a multisyllabic word that like nobody knows. So I just always want to recommend stuff that is created by a bilingual so they, that's put a lot of thought into it.
Do you have any like bilingual games for speech therapy?
Well, you could make any game a bilingual game. I mean, me on my store, I definitely have like bingo boards and tic-tac-toe, but I feel like you can make anything bilingual. Like if you have like the flashcards for it, right? You can play Candyland and you can work on colors in both languages. Or my favorite toy in the world is Don't Break the Ice. Anybody else got that game? Love Don't Break the Ice, right? Sometimes for Don't Break the Ice, I'll, any resource that I get, I'll put like the little pictures, whether I'm working on vocab or Arctic, and then I'll put it inside the ice cube, like on the inside on the bottom. And then when you put them in, then when you knock it down, you like have to say it, or as you're putting them back in, you spend more time building that damn game than you do smashing it. So every time you put an ice cube, you have to say what's there. Just like any game that, Pop the Pirate, you can just have good stuff with you. Do I have, see, my cards are almost gone, so I don't know if I should show you, but there's, you can incorporate any game, puzzles, anything like that. My store, I have bingo boards because in Spanish, loteria is like, in like Mexican countries, we do a lot of loteria and tic-tac-toe. I have some like coloring stuff. But you'll find, there's quite a few. I would say TPT nowadays is a better place to look for good bilingual work than the big companies like Super Duper Linguist Systems.
And do you have any other questions for Michelle? Anyone?
I'm gonna put my email in the chat so everyone will have it. Don't be a stranger. If you come up with a situation, just email me. If I know, I'll point you the direction. We all got to help each other out, guys.